Great, so welcome everyone. So this is the final show and tell for our Supporting Dementia Care project. So I'm Sophie Nelson, I'm LOTI's Digital Inclusion Projects Manager, and I'm joined by colleagues from the Helix Centre who delivered this project. So just as a quick introduction, this project is part of our GLA-funded Digital Inclusion Innovation Programme, which has been using innovation methods to design and scale initiatives to support digitally excluded Londoners who were left particularly vulnerable during the COVID pandemic. So if you missed any of our previous show and tells for the project, I can pop a link to our project page into the chat in a minute, so you can look at that in your own time, but it's just so you can find previous recordings and other background information, because the Helix Centre will just be talking about a specific phase. So they'll be talking about the final phase of the project. So that includes how they finalised the prototype, conducted and evaluated the pilot. So I think, Matt, actually, if you skip along, because we've got an agenda, haven't we? Yeah, here. So yeah, so I'll hand over to the Helix Centre in a second. So they'll be giving that project update, and then there will be time for questions. So if you think of anything whilst they're speaking, feel free to add them into the chat. Otherwise, you can raise your hand when we get to the Q&A section towards the end. So I think that's everything. Let me hand over to, I think, Sophie, you're starting first from the Helix Centre. Pass over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. We can't hear you, Sophie. Oh. It's just because Sophie and Matt are sat in the same room, so I think they're figuring out how to be able to talk.
Steve, you could just use this one computer.
So sorry about
We can hear you now.
It's actually good now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll just do this for now.
Okay.
Right, sorry about that. Yeah, so what we'll be talking about today is the Supporting Dementia Care project, as Sophie said. So just to introduce you to us as the Helix Centre team, we are a healthcare design and innovation lab at Imperial College based in St Mary's Hospital in Paddington, and as part of that we are also part of the UK Dementia Research Institute Care Research and Technology Centre. Oh cool, Sophie's just put some links in the chat. So yeah, so it'd be me, Sophie and Alice and Matt presenting today. Yeah, so just to kind of give a bit of a background as to where the project started, the sort of need identified really came from a project started during the pandemic, which sort of recognised that people living with dementia were some of the most isolated, and actually, although sort of restrictions started to lift, this sort of demographic continued to be one of the most isolated. And what we really were thinking about was actually, as in-person groups returned, how could we keep the benefits of new digital skills that were learned through shifting online, and sort of keep the benefits for people who maybe can't return to in-person groups for other reasons, whether it's sort of mobility challenges or any other sort of issues, but sort of keep those learned skills and look at sort of hybrid ways of working for this demographic of being engaged in communities. So our aim with the project was to develop digital approaches to tackling isolation with people with dementia and carers in the community by co-designing with London boroughs and voluntary and community sector. And so really what our sort of hypothesis was with the project was to do one thing really well, and then hopefully users would build up confidence and sort of have more belief of being sort of able and confident to try other sort of means or applications through their sort of learned digital skills. And so what we were sort of aiming to do was to introduce the technology through something that might be more sort of emotionally engaging, rather than sort of engaging with social skills and sort of building up communities, rather than necessarily something that is more practical, like sort of being able to access your online banking or something like that. And one thing that we really wanted to do as well with the project was to use off-the-shelf devices, so that it's less expensive and allows people to grow their skills, and also then hopefully becomes more translatable into other community groups beyond this project, and is more accessible for people to sort of pick up, hopefully, where we've sort of set off, I guess. And so what we initially did, so how this worked was to sort of have 3 phases, and so we'll primarily talk about phase 3 today, which is sort of the implementation in the pilot program that we run. But we also at the beginning had these 2 phases, which I'll just sort of give an overview, just so that we've got a sort of sense of how we got to the pilot in the end. And so just sort of identifying the definition and how we co-designed with people. So the what we did at the beginning, which potentially some people are here from those initial workshops, were sort of work with different London boroughs, voluntary community sector organisations and health partners to identify a range of possible options, which we sort of worked with people to identify which would be most useful to look into. And so what we actually did from these initial workshops is identify actually that the focus areas that we'd want to work on were a combination of the sort of tailored technologies approach and the hybrid community. So that was thinking about how we might be able to tailor off-the-shelf existing technologies and utilise those technologies in a way that combines sort of hybrid approaches to community groups. And this was sort of stemming from the idea that there's actually quite a lot of work that's already been done in thinking about sort of connected devices as a sort of digital library. And so we wanted to sort of take this alternative approach to how we might engage community groups through personalising different technologies. So highlighting that there. So our focus really was to, as we were sort of saying with the hypothesis, was to focus quite narrowly in on one specific area and try and just do that really well. So our focus area was really thinking about joining Zoom calls and how can we actually make the process of joining Zoom calls simpler, quicker and more intuitive, and thinking about that often actually you get these sort of complicated meeting invitations which don't necessarily mean a lot to people of how you go through that process of joining a meeting or whatever it might be, and so actually making it more engaging and interactive and reflective of a process that people might be more familiar with. And so what we did was sort of co-design with different community groups around London. So we worked with Westminster, Newnham, Hammersmith and Fulham and Lewisham, and you can kind of see we've linked this back to our show and tell from March, which has more of the process around how we work with these community groups and sort of develop these prototypes. So feel free to look at those if we can link that later. But really what we did on the next slide is look at developing all of the aspects of these prototypes from the idea of how to join a Zoom call. So this ranged from developing a stand to allow people to sort of rest the device so that we weren't asking people to pick it up, and look at creating a sort of QR code ticket system which allowed people to input a ticket into the stand and that be scanned through an app that we developed, and then join the Zoom call automatically. And so really it was a process of working with all of these different community groups and iterating all of the prototypes as we went along according to the different types of feedback that we were getting through testing these different prototypes. And so Matt will talk through what the prototype actually ended up being now. Yeah.
So you might need to. Can you hear me? Great. we're getting there with the technology. So yeah, I'll talk you through the prototype, what we got to, the stage we got to when we took it to our pilot. And then in a few minutes, Alice will take over and talk through the pilot that we ran in with a couple of community groups. This should be a little video that plays that will demonstrate how the prototype works. There's a cardboard stand. We're providing the devices to people and participants. The stand is designed for the device, but it's low cost and easy to assemble and use. The tablet computer is configured to provide instructions and be simple to use. It's a clean experience. Step-by-step instructions for each stage. You have a printed invite to the online meeting, which you can just slot in the gap in the stand behind the tablet, and then that code opens you right into the meeting. There's not normally somebody photographing you when you arrive. That was a practical demonstration purposes, but it launches you into the meeting. It's playing again for some reason. Here we go. So these are the main steps. We provided this kit, called it Digital Befriending Kit, and we provided it to people for testing, and included some visual instructions on how to do it. And we can go into how we supported people to try it in a bit, but that's the basic setup for people. We wanted to make the process feel as tangible and physical as possible, so people really liked the idea of the printed ticket, something they could put on the fridge and and use to jog their memory to remind them to come to the event. There's no need for email accounts, passwords, codes, anything like that. This is the, I'm going to flick now to Safari for a live demo. Hopefully this is working. This is the ticket maker, the invite maker that we created for this project. So this is available to use online. We can share links and resources, but you can, anyone who's organising a meeting, could be someone from an organisation, or it could be a family member. You can put in an event name, you can put in a day and a time. You just copy and paste a Zoom link. Hopefully you're seeing all of this. Copy and paste a Zoom link into here, and it creates a QR code there. You can upload a picture. This one I have ready for you. Make it look nice. Crop the image, pops it in there, and then when you're ready, you can print the card. And it's designed to work on a normal A4 printer, so that anybody can easily produce these with minimal effort or barriers. So that's the ticket maker, and how an organizer of a meeting can create and share invitations to the meeting. The stand itself, let's see, I think you can I think you can see the video as well. I mean, it's very simple. It folds flat. So it's, I've got a blurred background, but it's very simple, and it just it folds flat to be delivered or stored, and then you can just fold up the sides and close them shut, and it sits solidly on people's tables or desks. And it was interesting, the stand came later in the process, because there's nothing to stop you just using a ticket and the iPad as it is. But when we were testing it with people in the community groups, we found that people were quite hesitant with the devices. They struggled. Some people had quite shaky hand movements and things, and the process of trying to focus the camera on the code proved quite problematic. So that led us to create the stand to help people with that aspect of it. And actually the stand, I think, proved pretty successful in giving the tablet somewhere to sit in the home and presenting it in the right angle and making it accessible. So that's the stand. We put quite a lot of thought into configuring the devices. We created wallpapers and home lock screens that simplified the interface, made it more approachable. These tablet computers, they're very slick, they're very shiny, but you cannot see the buttons on them if you've got any accessibility needs. So we took the opportunity to label them using the wallpapers and lock screens, and tried building in the different steps to the process. Removing a lot of apps from the device, or moving them onto another screen, and doing things like putting rotation lock on so that it's always the right way up to make it easier. It was all about making the first experience as simple as possible, and then when people's confidence build, they start to use the device in more personalized or flexible ways. But to make that first experience easy to remember, easy to do. So just to say, just to reinforce that we got to this prototype through trial and error. This was trialing an earlier version where we had sort of these invites that were of a different design. We didn't have the stand. We went through a lot of different iterations on the invite design in particular to make it easy to scan. And doing test Zoom calls with people. Really interesting to see how people, interacted with the device, how hard to push the screen, tap the screen, push the buttons and things like that. And then, in terms of, all of the different bits, how it all works and supporting the, a pilot, we've got the participants at home. There's a web app for creating the tickets. We've created our own QR scanning app. I've glossed over that a little bit. We tried lots of free available QR scanning apps, including the native QR scanning features in tablets and smartphones, and just found that they all have extra functionality that is useful to some people, but very distracting or confusing potentially for our users. So they might have a history feature of all the things you've opened in the past, or adverts, or and features like that are all possible pitfalls and barriers to successfully joining the meeting. Also, by creating our own app, we were able to put context-specific prompts in. So instead of saying open link, it says join the Zoom meeting, or if it's not a Zoom meeting link, it'll warn you that it's not a Zoom meeting. And it meant the name and the icon on the screen could be appropriate to the context as well. So we went to that trouble of making purpose specific app, very simple app for both Android and iOS devices. And I think that was quite important. So I'll hand over to Alice to talk us through the pilot.
Thank you. Ooh, echo. No, I think it's fine. Okay. I guess I can't control. Oh, I can request control. Shall I click that button? Shall I just let you? I'll just let you change the slides. I don't want to mess it up. Yes, we wanted to test the kit out in kind of a more robust way, like more realistically than just going to the community groups and testing it there. So we decided to do this pilot where we were aiming for 12, but we actually got 11 people living with dementia, in some cases supported by their carers. We recruited them to take part in the pilot through the connections that we'd made in the earlier stages of testing. So they came from 3 different community groups. We went there and kind of chatted to people about the project, showed them it. We discussed with the community group leaders who might be good kind of candidates to take part. And then we kind of got them to talk about whether they were interested in doing it, and consent to it, in some cases with the help of their carers. So yeah, the way the pilot worked was that the 11 participants that we got, we split them into 2 groups. So there was a West London group and then kind of a South and East group. And we organised online meetings, 1 meeting a week for each group for 4 weeks. We took them all one of these kits. So this is my favourite picture from the installing the kits in people's homes in a lovely kind of garden flat. And we took them the kits, showed them how to use it, found a good place to leave it in their homes, got them set up with Wi-Fi if they didn't have Wi-Fi, although all but one of the participants did have Wi-Fi already. Yeah, and so we left the kits with them, and then we ran these 4 online groups, 1 a week for 4 weeks. And in those groups, we did different activities each time to try and test out what's a good activity to do, what helps people to enjoy the group, what helps them to kind of engage and interact with each other. So we tried poetry, bingo, music, and drawing. And of the 11 participants, there were, lots of different reactions to the kit and to the sessions, and lots of different kind of levels of engagement. But broadly, we've split that into 3 profiles of types of people, and the kind of result that we got from them. So the first one is the enthusiast. So there was a set of participants who sort of really loved the whole thing. They joined almost every call. Generally, the only reason that they missed sessions was because they had some kind of other appointment that clashed, and there was lots of kind of medical appointments that seemed to happen. And when they did join the call, they were like really enthusiastic, seemed to really enjoy it. They chatted, they engaged with everything, and they said at the end, like lots of participants said at the end, oh, I really wish it was going to continue. Like, I really enjoyed it, and I'd like to carry on. There was, I'd say that although this group was like extremely enthusiastic, in general, they did still have some support from a family member or a friend to remember that the session was going to happen. The friend kind of reminded them, and also help with them getting online using the kit. So I wouldn't say they were completely, even at the end, they were able to completely independently use it. And also during the call, they got some support to kind of understand when we were asking them or when we were speaking to them and when to respond, or yeah, sort of having someone next to them to give them a bit of guidance seemed to give them some confidence and help with the kind of smooth interaction. So then the next profile is the skeptic. So this group of participants, yeah, I think skeptical sums it up really. At times they were a bit confused or reluctant to take part and participate, and really were quite heavily encouraged by someone in their home to do so. But actually, this was almost the most rewarding group, because sometimes they actually really ended up enjoying things that they were almost adamant that they weren't going to. Like, there was one participant who was like, oh no, I absolutely don't want to do bingo, I definitely don't want to join in with this, like why have I been asked to do this? And then they like really enjoyed doing the bingo session, so that was great. And then the last group that we can talk about is, we've called it missing in action. So this is actually, I suppose, the group that we were most hoping to engage. So it was people that were living alone and are perhaps most likely to be isolated. They don't necessarily have so many friends or relatives to support them, and they didn't have anyone to help them to use the kit or remind them that the sessions would be happening. And we actually tried quite hard to keep engaging with them by kind of calling up on the phone, you know, a day before the session, half an hour before the session, but often the phone was out of charge, or the phone wasn't answered either. So although these participants, when we actually went to deliver the kit, they were able to use the ticket to join the call and have a chat with someone on Zoom, and they seemed like they would be a good candidate for it. Actually, when the reality came to joining the sessions on their own, they didn't join any, and we couldn't make much contact with them. And I suppose this would be an area where it would be nice to explore that a bit more and see what could be done to get them online. We did actually go have a second trip back to one of these participants and kind of try and understand why they hadn't been able to join, and you know, in some cases the iPads were hidden in a drawer and the tickets were missing and that kind of thing. So yeah, definitely an area to explore more. So then moving on to some tips for running the online groups that we discovered as we were going along that could be helpful if anyone is kind of considering doing similar. So we really wanted to encourage the participants to chat and make connections with each other online, not just to kind of be observers in a session that they're listening to. And we found a good way to do that is to ask a really open question that enable people to really talk about whatever their passion area is. So for example, there's one participant that really liked going to church, and they were comfortable with telling that story. So we asked something like, tell us something you're excited about, or what is something you love, that enables the participants to talk about whatever their story is. It can fit into that question. We also found that it was a good idea to invite each participant to speak using their name, so ask them sort of one at a time. So we did have a little bit of a challenge of talking over the top of each other, kind of once people figured out that talking was a thing that they could do on Zoom, the concept of like waiting for one person to finish speaking before the next one starts, and as we all have that challenge sometimes on Zoom of talking over each other, that was almost amplified, I would say, with this group. So reminding participants that the group's going to happen by giving them a call shortly before is definitely a good idea to remind them. We found it was good to have a spare kind of group facilitator that perhaps has their camera turned off even, but is there on the call to be able to do some tech support. So if you find that one participant isn't there and you're expecting them, then that other person can give them a call and try and guide them through logging on, get them online. And then, yeah, balance between activity and open kind of chatter. We found it to work well, spending about 20 minutes just having a chat, and then 20 minutes or so on the activity. I think it's kind of long enough. Like anything that lasts too long in this kind of online environment might not be so successful. And then the last one is about being quite careful for participants to know what to expect and what they're coming to. So we set these 4 online groups up to do different activities because we wanted to figure out what works best and test them. But that meant that, for example, the first week we did poetry, and then the second week singing. We perhaps didn't set the scene that in the second week they shouldn't come expecting to do poetry again, that we would do something different, because then some people, when it was singing, they were expecting poetry and the singing was a bit too high energy for them on that day, and so they weren't didn't enjoy it so much. So I think, yeah, setting expectations, and actually on one occasion we sent out a new Zoom invite in the post specifically for the bingo, so we could also send the bingo cards, and that seemed to work really nicely. People were quite excited by getting something in the post and made it all feel a bit more tangible because you get a physical thing. So in terms of the impact, I think in general it was really effective in getting some participants to be more comfortable with the technology that actually their relatives might have been trying to get them to use for a little while without success, and this sort of just jump started them into the pattern. So you can see here there's a nice quote: "Thank you for your support in setting the participant on the road to using IT again, and we're secretly hoping they bring you back to run sessions. It was so much fun and social." And both of these participants were actually on the more skeptical side to start with, and yeah, you can see that then participation kind of turned that around. Okay, so the outcome, yeah, we hope this is just the beginning. Of course, we've only tested it with these 11 participants, but it would be lovely if it could scale, and some more groups and more people could replicate what we've done. So we think that we'd say that it's generally successful, that 9 out of the 11 people that got the iPad, they joined in with the sessions. They generally enjoyed them and found them to be useful in some way to build better connections and yeah, help them with feeling more comfortable with technology. And there's definitely a really strong desire from some of them for it to continue. But like I started to touch on, we could definitely do more work to connect with people that are most socially isolated. So that group where they don't have anyone to support them to use the kit, we perhaps didn't quite crack it there. So that would be lovely if that got looked into further. And all of the insights, there's even more than we've talked about today. All of the insights will be published in this toolkit that we've created, and it will go on the LOTI website. And the idea of that is that anyone could use that to, all the resources are in there, all the things that you need to be able to try and replicate what we've done in another organisation. So this is just a link to the Minder Meeting Place website, where we've got a page where you can download the things that you can find in the toolkit. We've also got the things here where you can download, for example, the Tap and Chat app, at the moment only on Android, but hopefully on Apple too soon, and other things like the background screens and wallpapers, and get a link to the Zoom Ticket Maker website. So coming to the end, kind of where we're at now, and as the pilot's finished, all the participants, they got the option of whether to keep the kit or to choose another a voucher, basically another incentive, and that was like a little test to see how engaged they were, I suppose, with the iPad and how much they'd like to continue using it. And they all chose to keep the kit. And there's a poetry group that has started with some of the participants, I think it's in Lewisham, and the poetry group's online using the kits. So that's really nice that that's continued. And we're exploring a couple of avenues of how other organisations might use and replicate this. As a result of the LOTI conference, actually, kind of got in touch with a few people who might want to use it, and that's all in progress. And then, like I say, we've got this toolkit of all the learnings and all the resources that'll be on the website that you can all use. So I suppose pretty much all that's left to say is that Helix, our kind of priority is to use this method of co-creation and designing with the people who will be benefiting and using what it is that we've created, and none of that would have been possible without the people who we collaborated with. So all the people in the pilot and the people in the community groups that we worked with. And yeah, I guess in the pilot there was some people who I think it's had a lasting, hopefully will have had a lasting impact on. There was one participant, for example, who his wife had been trying to encourage him to use an iPad, you know, prior to this, and had been a bit reluctant, and since apparently he's using it for playing brain games and things like that. And so yeah, it's a little bit of a victory, I suppose, and a nice story, that even though we're not continuing the online groups ourselves, that the iPads are being put to good use. So yeah, we're going to have a time for questions now, and feel free to ask anything, but we're also really keen to hear from you. Kind of what would you need to know beyond what we've talked about in order to replicate this in whatever your roles are, or whatever opportunities you might have to do that. So I'll hand over the floor to all of you.
Yes.
I can see someone's got their hand up. Yeah, go for it. If you've got your hand up, just go for it.
Yeah, it's Karen, and I'm from Southwark. Thank you very much for that. It's very interesting. And I suppose my kind of ears went up when we were talking about those people who were pretty isolated, really, because actually they are the people. I'm from adult social care, and they are the people that we work very hard with around their engagement and social isolation, and looking for better ways to help them, really. And I suppose, you know, is just to kind of recognise that you know it is a challenge, that it doesn't take away from what you've achieved there, because I think it's great. And I think, you know, for those people, like you said, Alice, in the middle ground of kind of, you know, sort of lagging really in their sort of general enthusiasm, it has clearly sparked a fire for them. So that's great, and I definitely think there's opportunities there, that you know we can learn from that, kind of locally. Anyway, I won't waffle because they're the thoughts going through my mind.
I would thank you, Karen. I would say, I mean, geographical proximity to people you're supporting would have helped us a bit more. We found, you know, being in, if we were able to pop, I mean, again, during COVID we couldn't have, but during this project there was, you know, we did do in-person visits to get people set up and familiarise them, consent them. But if we'd had the ability to pop round a bit more reactively, you know, when people to provide extra coaching or support, it might have helped. But travelling right across London at short notice, when people it was a limitation of what we were able to do. We were probably able to support people in West London a little bit more, but building that sort of in-person support around then getting people online might be a good approach. I mean, the one person who really didn't get onto any of the groups lived the furthest away, and you know, didn't have a phone turned on or plugged in, and you know, it was just so many barriers. But we, you know, if we had a more, if it was easier to be sort of at the door, or you know, to help be a bit more hands-on, I think we could have made it. It could have borne fruit for that person.
I mean, we're definitely moving away from the sort of, you know, the old-fashioned method of providing daycare for people. I think, you know, clearly the message that we're hearing back from residents is that, you know, they want something different, and this could well fit that bill. And I'm just sort of thinking, well, you know, even sort of having a sort of body of volunteers who maybe sort of you know, whose job it is to go and just sit with the person whilst the event is going on, you know, may actually sort of be a very positive offer.
I mean, a couple of other insights sort of related. I mean, we set off on this project looking to support people with a dementia diagnosis and their carers who are digitally excluded. And I think, you know, we keep focusing on the hardest the hardest goal of getting someone with a diagnosis living alone, see if they could do it themselves. In the meantime, I think quite a lot of people can benefit from, you know, carers, partners who aren't digitally savvy, could use it more easily, you know, without the same cognitive obstacles. So we sort of, I think at this point it's good to sort of say, well, yes, actually there is a lot of people supporting people with dementia who can benefit from this easier access as well, and that has a knock-on effect. A lot of, especially in the pandemic, a lot of carers felt very isolated too and wanted support from each other, and that was part of the inspiration behind this. So there's value there. The other thing that we found quite interesting is that, you know, with a couple of participants, they had sons or daughters or quite tech-enabled partners in the house or supporting them or visiting regularly, and it wasn't anything new to them, but actually giving the person at the centre of it their own device and their own, you know, a service, the invites for them was quite different to, say, joining Zoom on your daughter's phone or you know, it was about them, it was the service for them, it was designed for them, and even if they needed a bit of support to use it, I think there's value in saying this is mine and this is friendly and this is familiar to me, and I'm, you know, building confidence up using this, having, you know, just their apps on their device. I think there's something in that as well. We don't know how many of the iPads now are on eBay or something like that. Hopefully none. Hopefully they're all being used for what we wanted. But it, you know, giving people their own permission, affording them, saying this is for you, this is important for you, this is for you to customize how you want to use it. I think it is valuable, even if there is technology in the home already.
Yeah, and we know for a lot of households they have technology. It's just the group we're talking about here, to some extent, doesn't have access to that technology.
Yeah, we were surprised how many had Wi-Fi, even if they didn't use for visitors or whatever reason, but didn't use it directly themselves or had stopped using it because they'd lost the ability to engage with technology, perhaps. And that was the case with a few participants. You know, they used to be, but once the email's gone, everything else kind of falls away. Everything else is mediated through email, which is something we tried to tackle head on, I suppose.
Great, good. Thanks for that.
I think we've got a couple of questions in the chat from Fiona. So the first one is, does this work with Android devices too? Because the camera positions can vary. I wonder if it's helpful, Matt, to give like a recap of how you came to use the iPad, and then also, answer the question more directly too.
Yeah, we did. So from the start, we developed it for Android and Apple systems, and we did test both to start with. And so we bought two different Android devices, a Samsung and a Lenovo, and the most basic iPad to sort of compare the different experiences and to see whether it made much of a difference. And it didn't make a huge difference. There are some little things. The Lenovo and the Samsung, they don't have a physical home button to push to reset everything, whereas the iPad does have a physical home button to reset it, and that felt quite valuable. The Zoom app, it's funny, it's nothing to do with the sort of the native operating system, but the Zoom app on the iPad was a bit more configurable and a bit easier. We could cut out a couple more steps around the permissions to use the camera and things like that. But actually, it was quite they were quite comparable, and we were aware that, you know, Android devices are more affordable and are more likely to get used in this setting. In the end, for the pilot, we decided to go for the iPad for one very simple issue, that we were having a focusing problem with the Tap and Chat app that we created, and we needed to push on with things. So the Android app needed a bit, you know, had a bug that needed fixing. So for practical reasons, we went with the iPad at that stage. But actually, the Android app's available, and it's equally good. In fact, the only reason we haven't got the iOS app available yet on the App Store is that Apple are telling us that it's too simple. Their design guidelines say that all of their apps on the App Store need to be engaging and I don't know. Anyway, we've got an argument with Apple about it, because the whole point is to make something really simple that unlocks it for a very particular type of user. We're not packing it full of features that make the app engaging. So hopefully we'll be able to work that out. But we do have other ways of providing the Apple version of the app if anyone does have a pile of iPads to use. So yeah, it's available on both, and it could also be used. I see the other question is whether it can be used with systems other than Zoom. Yes, it can. I think at the time through COVID, most of the community groups seem to be using Zoom, but anything that you can create a link for, so I think it'll work with Teams. Anything you can create a sort of a single link for, you can put into that ticket maker. That's not specific to Zoom at the moment, and it should work. I mean, also with the, you know, any QR code reader will work. You don't have to use ours. We just wanted to make a simpler one. So, you know, the native app on the camera app on the newer devices, you know, should pick it up if people can navigate the complexity of a camera interface, or some of the sort of other QR code readers that are out there will all do the job, just not quite as smoothly. But yeah, we didn't want to lock people into all the different, you know, the different bits that we've, you know, it's about creating resources that hopefully people can find useful because they're adaptable.
Thanks, Matt. And with the stand, that currently the template for the stand is just for the iPad though, isn't it?
Yeah, so it is. I mean, it's actually adaptable reasonably easily. I mean, if people want to get into the stand, creating the stand, you know, to some extent we could do some work with you to tailor it to your device. It wouldn't be too tricky to do. Batch producing them would be an additional step. But if someone has a particular interest in doing it, I think we'd be open to exploring that. Fiona, I think got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm the person who posted the questions already. I have got so many questions. I've got building work outside, so that's why I was posting, but the reversing lorry seems to have stopped beeping now. So forgive me if it starts reversing again. I think it's brilliant, actually. I saw some of the earlier things you were doing and I was a bit skeptical, I'm honest, for various reasons. But we're working very closely with the Housing Association, and I could see this working brilliantly in that environment, because it would be very simple for them to make sure that, you know, if they've got a weekly meeting or a monthly meeting, if they needed to give people some extra support or perhaps have a buddy system, so that neighbours could support each other. I can see that working absolutely brilliantly in this environment. So yeah, I was going to ask about the template, but I think you just said that it's going to be available, and I'm going to download that. I'm going to find, I'm an Apple user, so I'm going to find an Android device in my test system and download that to see if we can create some cards. Because again, within a housing association, the delivery system is really simple. Although the one thing I would say, and this is where I was skeptical before. So one of the things that we're finding, so I don't work for a housing association, I'm the leader of a tech company, but we have been working very closely with housing associations locally and delivering tech into them. One of the things they're trying to get away from is actually having to go to each door and deliver a ticket. Now, I guess that if it's a monthly thing, it's one ticket. Person just has to remember to log in. Did you look at potentially having like a digital reminder? So almost like the screen would come on and go, you have a meeting in 10 minutes. You have a meeting in 9 minutes. Get yourself a coffee now. That sort of thing, because that's one of the things that we're working for them. This reminder system is incredibly important because it doesn't only work for you need to have a call. It also works for you need to take your medication or you need to drink, because obviously medication and hydration are two things that hospitalize people and get people into full-time care. Yeah. Sorry, I've got so many questions. I could keep you going for hours.
No, if I respond to that, I mean, that's really interesting, and one where, you know, the Tap and Chat app could perhaps be more, you know, to satisfy Apple's demands, be more engaging. You know, it could be that you scan the ticket and it logs the time and date, and actually, you know, provides the prompt at the right time with the countdown. I think that could be really nice, while still being a very simple experience. So you could, you know, you don't necessarily have to scan it at the right time and the right place, as long as people keep their devices on their, you know, in a prime position in their home, which we know that a lot of people don't. I mean, trying to persuade people to keep devices powered on or plugged in even, or you know, in a prominent position is half the battle, I think, here, because I think it's a generation that is used to putting things away and not comfortable with having things sort of in standby mode. Still, it's, you know, it's the most digitally excluded group that we're trying to work with, as you know. So I think there would be scope, you know, it would be very to improve the app in that way could be really interesting. The delivering the tickets, you know, we in the toolkit we go into some detail about setting up the Zoom meetings to make it easier, like the settings for each, you know, for the Zoom meeting that we'd recommend. We didn't log, people weren't logged into Zoom accounts on their own tablets. They don't need to be. You know, as long as the meeting's set up correctly, you can let people in without them needing to be logged in, which, you know, it removes a barrier, protects their privacy potentially a little bit more as well. Means that you don't, you know, we didn't have the tablets with a PIN code. We kept them, and they were managed devices as well that we had. It wouldn't, you know, that was just for purposes of the trial really. But you know, there's no personal information on the device, so we've took the view that if the device was stolen or went missing or something, there was very little risk. There weren't any email apps allowed on it or anything like that. We wanted to keep it as accessible as possible by not having pins and logins and passwords. So we put quite a lot of thought into how you set it up, specifically for Zoom anyway. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but hopefully I answered one of your questions.
Yeah, thank you for that. If nobody else has questions, I'll come back.
I just wanted to ask a question to the last person who talked about the implementation. I think she talked about the different profiles that they managed to notice in the participants that they worked with. Mm-hmm. I want to know the enthusiastic one, those ones who were enthusiastically interested in the project, whether they were using computers during their career or they were not using, because most of the people, elderly people, those who are familiar with technology, they find using it for anything easily, and they can participate on any project that you're running. But those who are new to technology would shy away and see no need, and they don't want to be bothered. So I wanted to find out the background of those people.
Yeah, interesting, and not a straightforward answer, but I would say there wasn't a particularly strong correlation between people having prior experience and enjoying it. I think there was, I mean, I can think of one participant who did talk to us quite a lot about how they'd started to use some kind of device in the past, and then they'd got out of the habit and they were excited to get have the opportunity again to learn. They talked a lot about, oh, I want to learn and is happy to learn. But there were others who were extremely enthusiastic about it, who I don't think they had a particular experience with technology previously, and I'd actually say they were almost as or more excited about the group. It was about them making the connection with the other people that they were really enthusiastic about, I would say, more so than just the idea of having the iPad and using the iPad and the technology. Yeah, I hope that answers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was about whether people were enthusiastic about socializing or not, and that technology was, right, you know, second place to that, and perhaps skeptical about the ability to socialize on technology, and, you know, find it meaningful. That was where I think we saw the change in the skeptics, was like, oh, this can be an interesting conversation with people I haven't met before, doing something that I would, you know, might turn my nose up at in real life, like bingo or something like that. So it was, I think that's the way it should be. The technology becomes a facilitator and not the the goal in itself. But you know, we did have a very small sample size, so it's only so much we could generalize here, but it did, yeah, there were certainly people who were very enthusiastic, although they, you know, you got the impression that they didn't have very little experience with technology before. So
the technology was not the motivator.
I think some people, no, I think that's right. I think some people were motivated to sign up by the possibility of getting an iPad or a tablet, but that wasn't the motivation for joining each session or being excited for each session. So it's, yeah, again, a bit more nuanced, than you might think immediately.
So, sorry, this is Fiona again. So, if you would like some help with your app, I'm really happy to chat to you about that. And B, what do you do from now? Where are you going to from now with this?
So I think, thank you. We want to find a way to, you know, push it forward, to develop it further. I mean, this project and this funding is now complete, but we are. You know, our team, we're part of the Care Research and Technology Centre at Imperial. This has been, you know, that project's all about, that centre's all about remote care and smart homes and getting devices and sensors into people's homes to provide remote care and understand more about dementia as it develops in the home, testing new therapies, things like that. So big project, but part of what we do is the user involvement and user perceptions of the technology and participant and patient involvement. And actually this project has been fascinating for us for changing the way in which we intend to engage people in the community in the research of the centre and in new technology and in new services. And because we want to reach more diverse groups, we want to reach people, normal people, not just people who are interested in research. So we want to use it as a platform really to do more of that and to build up relationships with community groups around London, also outside of London, and see if we can perhaps use these tools to engage people in research, dementia research more broadly. So the long and short of it is I think we can try and find opportunity and funds to take it further. How quickly, you know, is a little unknown, but hopefully we can find something to build on the momentum, because it feels like we reached a momentum and we would like to keep going. 10th of May, never reply. I can just check my email. I don't know which email you had, sorry, but I will certainly